At the break of dawn on September 21st, 1327, the stone halls of Berkeley Castle rang with screams that chilled the air. Villagers nearby thought demons had come, but what happened inside was far worse. King Edward II of England, once a prince destined for greatness, faced a torture so cruel it defies imagination, a heated iron searing his intestines from within, hours of unbearable agony stretching before him. But to understand how an English king ended up in such misery, we must step back. Edward wasn't an ordinary prisoner. He was the son of Edward I, Longshanks, one of England's greatest warrior kings. Edward I had conquered Wales, battled Scotland, and left behind the image of a ruthless yet capable monarch. For his son, expectations were impossibly high. Born in 1284 at Carnarvon Castle, on newly conquered Welsh soil, Edward II carried not only royal blood but also a symbolic role as the first Prince of Wales. From childhood, however, Edward showed little interest in war or politics. Unlike his father, who lived for battle and conquest, Edward preferred the arts of construction, carpentry, and music. He mingled easily with commoners, enjoying their company more than that of his nobles. At first this seemed harmless, but in a feudal society, where hierarchy was everything, such habits made the aristocracy uneasy. The unease turned to scandal with the rise of Piers Gaveston, a young knight of humble birth. Edward adored him, showering him with titles, lands, and favors. Chroniclers described their relationship as unusually close, fueling rumors of intimacy. To the nobles, Gaveston was arrogant and insolent. His influence over the king made him hated. Twice the barons forced Gaveston into exile, and twice Edward recalled him. Finally, in 1312, a group of nobles captured Gaveston and executed him brutally. This murder scarred Edward. His reign slid into instability. His attempt to assert authority at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314 was disastrous. Facing Robert the Bruce of Scotland, Edward commanded some 25,000 men, yet poor leadership and lack of morale turned the campaign into humiliation. The English were routed, fleeing the field. For Edward, it destroyed what little military credibility he had. For Scotland, it meant freedom for another generation. After Bannockburn, Edward's rule grew weaker. He clung to new favorites, most notably Hugh Despenser the Younger, and his father. The Despensers enriched themselves shamelessly, seizing lands and crushing opponents. They became symbols of corruption and tyranny. Nobles rebelled, only to be crushed and executed, deepening the king's isolation. Even Queen Isabella, daughter of the French king, turned against him. Humiliated by her husband's neglect and angered by the Despensers' dominance, she sought allies abroad. Among them was Roger Mortimer, an exiled noble who became both her political partner and, many chroniclers believe, her lover. In 1326, Isabella and Mortimer invaded England with only about 700 soldiers. But discontent was so widespread that towns and nobles joined them willingly. The Despensers fled with Edward, but they were captured. Hugh Despenser met a hideous death, hanged, drawn, and quartered, while Edward faced a slower downfall. Stripped of power, he was forced to abdicate in January 1327, giving the crown to his 14-year-old son, Edward III. From king, he had become a captive, first moved between castles, then confined at Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire. Conditions were harsh, perhaps intentionally so. Chroniclers suggest he was kept cold, starved, and humiliated, breaking his spirit before the final act. By September, Mortimer and Isabella decided his existence was too dangerous. So long as Edward lived, he remained a rallying point for rebellion. On the night of September 20th, assassins entered his chamber. What followed was one of the most infamous killings in medieval history. To avoid visible wounds that might suggest murder, they used a method designed to leave no mark, pressing a red-hot iron rod into his body through a horn, burning his internal organs beyond repair. His screams carried through the thick castle walls into the countryside. Villagers later swore they could hear the cries miles away. Edward's death was not only cruel but symbolic. It mocked the rumors of his intimacy with men, degrading him in death, as he had been mocked in life. It reflected the hatred his enemies bore for him, and their fear that he might somehow rise again. Yet even in disgrace, Edward's fate left a deep mark. His young son Edward III would grow into one of England's greatest kings, but the memory of his father's murder would fuel his eventual vengeance against Mortimer, who was executed in 1330. Isabella, once triumphant, lived her last years quietly in semi-retirement, overshadowed by whispers of her role in the regicide. In the end, Edward II became a tragic figure, a king unsuited to rule in an age of war, betrayed by those closest to him, remembered more for his horrifying death than his life. His story endures as a chilling reminder of the brutal politics of the Middle Ages, where love, loyalty, and power could all turn fatal.